Writers, you know that today is our first official day of our fairy tale unit. We're going to read lots of fairy tales so that the stories, their language, and their sounds will be in your bones. Whenever I read a fairy tale, I think about the fact that before fairy tales were ever written down, they were told and retold time and time again in different ways. They've been told and retold and passed on from one person to another because they work as stories. Fairy tales are our most beloved stories of all time. In a minute, we're going to practice getting Little Red Riding Hood in your bones. But first, pause this video and go grab a piece of paper. We're going to make a story planning booklet. First, you're going to fold your paper in half, then fold it in half again. Here's what mine looks like. So now you have a little mini book. You have the first page, you can open it up. There's the second page, third, and fourth page. Before we get into this activity, we're going to read the book Little Red Riding Hood.
Little Red Riding Hood, written by Brothers Grimm, illustrated by Ben Mahan. Once there was a sweet little girl who was loved by everyone, especially her grandmother. The old woman had sent the little girl a riding hood made of red velvet, and because she always wore it, people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, her mother handed her a basket saying, "Take these goodies to your grandmother, for she is ill, and they will make her feel better. Now go directly to your grandmother's house, and don't run off the path. And when you get there, be sure to say, 'Good morning,' and don't peek into all the corners as soon as you go inside." "I'll be careful," said Little Red Riding Hood, and she waved goodbye to her mother. Now it happened that the grandmother lived in the woods, about a half-hour's walk from town. As Little Red Riding Hood walked through the forest, she met a wolf, but she was not frightened, for she did not know how bad he was. "Good day," said the wolf, "and where are you going this morning?" "To grandmother's," replied Little Red Riding Hood. "She is very weak and ill, and I am bringing her this basket of goodies." Then the wolf asked her where her grandmother lived, and Little Red Riding Hood replied, "Her house is deep in the woods, under 3 big oak trees near some hazelnut bushes." The wolf thought to himself, "This young girl will taste delicious. She will be more tender than the old woman, but somehow I must get them both." Then he walked along with Little Red Riding Hood, remarking, "Just look at all the pretty flowers, and listen to the songs of the birds. Why are you hurrying on your way when it is so delightful out here in the woods?" Then Little Red Riding Hood looked around her. Golden sunlight shone through the trees, colorful flowers were everywhere. Suddenly she thought, "It would not take me long to gather a few flowers, and grandmother would be happy if I brought her a bouquet." So she began picking the flowers. Each time she picked one, she saw a prettier one a bit farther from the path, and so she wandered deeper and deeper into the woods. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to grandmother's house. He knocked on the door, and the grandmother asked who was there. "It's Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf said. "I have brought you some goodies. Please open the door." "Lift the latch and come in," said the grandmother. "I am too weak to get up." So the wolf lifted the latch and ran in, and in no time at all, he had eaten the old woman. Then he climbed into the bed and pulled the bed curtains shut. Little Red Riding Hood went on picking flowers until she could carry no more, and then she remembered her grandmother. She continued on her way. When she reached her grandmother's house, the door was open, but as soon as she stepped inside, she felt a bit uncomfortable. "Good morning," she called, but her grandmother did not answer. Then she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. How odd her grandmother looked, with her covers pulled up high and her cap pulled down so low. "Oh, grandmother," said Little Red Riding Hood, "what big ears you have." "The better to hear you with," said the wolf. "Oh, grandmother, what large eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to see you with," replied the wolf. "And grandmother, what huge hands you have," exclaimed Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to hold you with," replied the wolf. "But, oh, grandmother, what sharp teeth you have," cried Little Red Riding Hood. "The better to eat you with," growled the wolf, and he swallowed Little Red Riding Hood in one gulp. Then he fell asleep and began snoring loudly. It so happened that a hunter was passing by, and he thought to himself, "How loudly the old woman snores today. I had better see if she is all right." When he entered the room, he saw the wolf asleep in the old woman's bed. "So there you are, you old sinner," thought the hunter. "How long I have searched for you. At first, he planned to shoot the wolf, but when he did not see the old woman, he knew she had been eaten by the wolf. Perhaps she can still be saved, he thought. Then he took out a pair of scissors and cut open the wolf's stomach. Out sprang Little Red Riding Hood, crying, "Oh, how frightened I was! It was so dark inside the wolf's stomach." Then the grandmother came out too, for she was still alive. Little Red Riding Hood quickly ran out and found some huge stones, which she put inside of the wolf's body. The wolf woke up and tried to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he fell down dead. Everyone was happy then. The hunter took the wolf's fur home with him. The grandmother ate the goodies that Little Red Riding Hood had brought, and she began to feel much better. And Little Red Riding Hood said to herself, "I will never again run off the path when my mother tells me not to." The end.
Let's grab our planning booklets again. My booklet has 4 pages, and I know yours does as well. I'm imagining that the first page will be the setup speech. The second page of the story is the first small moment of what happens first. And the third page will tell the trouble. Then on the last page, things are all wrapped up. Think about your story, and think about how you will fit the whole story into just the pages of your story planning booklet. As you imagine, touch each page thinking about what you'll put and tell on each page. The background, the first scene, the trouble, and the ending. I'll give you an example. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who always wore a bright red hood, so everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. She was told never to talk to strangers, but she never remembered because she was such a friendly girl. That's the backstory. Now I'm going to tell you about the first small moment on the second page. One day, page 2 usually starts like that. Little Red Riding Hood's mother said, "Would you take a basket of lunch to your sick grandma? It will cheer her up." Along the way, a wolf tricked her into taking the long way to Grandma's house. Now for the trouble. When Little Red Riding Hood got to Grandma's house, she found the wolf instead of Grandma, and the wolf ate her. The last page is where they solved the problem. A hunter came by and saw the wolf. He saved Little Red Riding Hood and her grandma. Now I want you to retell the Little Red Riding Hood story to a family member, a pet, or even a stuffed animal. Remember to start with the backstory on the first page. Then tell about your first small moment on the second page. That small moment should include dialogues and details. Then there's the trouble, and it all wrapped up. Writers write adaptations all the time. They take classic stories and they write different versions of it. Writers call this kind of writing an adaptation. And although writers adapt all sorts of stories, there is one kind of story that writers especially adapt: fairy tales. The question we'll be researching is, what does the author seem to be trying to do when he or she changes something and not others? And most of all, how will a study of someone else's adaptations help me write my own? To get ready for an adaptation of a fairy tale, we should probably study some. And we should try to figure out how the author made them. In a minute, I'm going to read an adapted fairy tale for you. While I read, I want you to answer a few questions. Number 1, when this author adapted the original story, what did she change? Number 2, what did she keep the same? And number 3, what does the author seem to be trying to do when he or she changed some things and not others? These 3 questions are your assignment on Class Dojo, so make sure you write down your answers and take a picture of it. We're going to read Little Red Riding Duck by Charlotte Guillain. What is something you already noticed that's different about this version? That's right, Charlotte changed Little Red Riding Hood from a girl to a duck. Don't forget, our job isn't just to find the changes, it's also to think about why the author might have made those changes and what her reasons might have been for doing so. Let's pause and think about why Charlotte might have changed Little Red Riding Hood from a girl to a duck. Too bad we can't just call Charlotte on the phone and ask her, but that doesn't mean we give up. Maybe she thought it was funny. Maybe ducks are her favorite animal. Do you have a guess or a theory? Write it down on your paper. Let's start reading and continue to answer those 3 questions. Don't forget, you can pause the video to write down your answers during the story.
Little Red Riding Duck, written by Charlotte Guillain, illustrated by Dawn Beacon. Characters: Little Red Riding Duck, Mother, Grandma, Wolf, Woodcutter. Once upon a time, a little duckling lived with her mother in the woods. Her mother had made a red cloak for her, so everybody called her Little Red Riding Duck. One day, Little Red Riding Duck's mother gave her a basket of food to take to her grandma's house. Little Red Riding Duck was walking along the path when she met a wolf. "Where are you going with that basket of food?" he asked her. "I'm taking it to my grandma's house," said Little Red Riding Duck, who was a little scared. "You don't want to go that way," said the wolf. "I know a shortcut." But the wolf sent Little Red Riding Duck farther into the woods. When Little Red Riding Duck was lost in the woods, the wolf ran ahead and knocked on Grandma's door. When the old duck opened the door, he bundled her into a cupboard. "I'll save you for pudding," the wolf said, licking his lips. Then the wolf put on Grandma's clothes and climbed into her bed. "When Little Red Riding Duck gets here, I'll be waiting for her," he chuckled. Before long, Little Red Riding Duck knocked on the door and came in. When she saw the wolf in her grandma's bed, she gasped and said, "What big ears you have, Grandma!" The wolf replied, "All the better to hear you with, my dear." When Little Red Riding Duck said, "What big eyes you have, Grandma!" the wolf replied, "All the better to see you with, my dear." Finally, Little Red Riding Duck said, "What big teeth you have, Grandma!" The wolf jumped out of bed and replied, "All the better to eat you with." Little Red Riding Duck quacked loudly for help. A passing woodcutter heard her quacks and came running to the rescue. The wolf took one look at the woodcutter's sharp axe and ran away as fast as his wolfy legs could carry him. Little Red Riding Duck, her grandma, and the woodcutter all sat down to enjoy tea together, and the wolf never bothered Little Red Riding Duck or her grandma ever again. The end.
Writers, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. When you make a theory, or 2 or 3, about why an author did this or that, even if you're not totally right, this helps your own writing, because the theories that you invent about how and why an author adapted a fairy tale will fuel your own writing. Be sure that you're jotting down these theories in your notebooks. You know that to compare adaptations and get a sense for how they tend to go, you need to study more than one text. So you can read more fairy tale adaptations in our very own virtual classroom. It'll be posted on Class Dojo, and all you need to do is click on the book cover that you want to read. And you will be taken directly to the video of the book reading. You can even find the books that we read in class today. One more thing, it will be helpful as you study these fairy tales to pay attention to the fact that a lot of things stay the same in the adaptations. The trouble is always the same. Don't forget to turn in your answers to the 3 questions on Class Dojo. Have a great day!